Hey, what it do? Emlyn in the mix, season 3, episode 6 for ya. Hope you've had an amazing week out there creating, working on music, or whatever it is. Your love and passion for music technology is why you're back into this podcast. For those of you who are new to this podcast, my name is Emlyn, hence the name, Emlyn in the Mix. But this podcast isn't about me. This podcast is about music technology, music gear, music software, you name it. We cover it on the channel. And today we have some awesome news for you guys in the world of music technology and what has been happening. You know, we like to talk about music-related things. Sometimes we go into artists, and other times most of the time we go into music technology, software and hardware. Now, I am actually recording this at a different time, so if my vibe is different today, that's because I'm doing it at the end of the day instead of at the beginning of the day, but I have such a hectic schedule tomorrow that I decided to just get this podcast done. For me, it's a Friday night, and most of the awesome news has happened this week in the world of music technology, and I'm just going to cover what has happened in this last week. So let's just get stuck into what is new and what is happening out there. The first piece of news here comes to us from Output. Now, Output makes the incredible hardware, the platform hardware, which is, you can't see it in this video if you're watching the podcast on YouTube. I've actually got the Output desk here, but if you have a look, if you are watching the video, you can see there's a picture of the Output desk there. They also make a thing called a sidecar, which is like a 19U rack style piece of furniture that goes on the side of your studio desk. They make stands, and probably the most notable piece of hardware that they've made of late is the Frontier speakers, which they actually collaborated with Barefoot, which I cannot wait to get my hands on these. I've been meaning to show you guys on this channel for many moons now, but haven't been able to get my hands on them. They're actually limited, or they've been hard to get, especially with the pandemic and so forth. But now the new thing, and this is what we're talking about today on the podcast, they are releasing the panels. Now, this is exciting. I know it seems a bit weird. Why are we getting excited about panels? But I just don't know really any companies that are out there doing that with this amount of love and craft, because I know how good their furniture is because I have one and I'm so happy with it. I know that they're going to have gotten these panels right now. Panels, why do you need panels? Who needs panels? Well, if you need some acoustic treatment in your room, which most of us do. I fortunately am in like a really old room here, and I have polystyrene on the roof, but it actually works kind of like an absorber, I guess you could call that. But these look awesome. I mean, let's take a quick look. So this is coming from Output here, of course, what they say about their diffusers. So eco-friendly absorbers, bass traps, and diffusers. So diffusers are separate to the absorbers, and we're going to show the bass traps as well. It's a complete high-performance system for improving the sound of your studio that's aesthetically on point and built with DeFi. I don't know what DeFi is, but we're going to have a look at this. We partnered with the sound science experts, follow the science, DeFi, to craft the perfect acoustic panels and make your studio sound and look schmick. I added that word in. See them in the studio. So if we have a look here, we're looking on the video. Of course, you can't see it on the podcast, but they look really sexy. They come in 3 different colors. You got like a charcoal, you got a white, and then you got an orange, and then you can mix the panels as well. The quality looks really good. Look, you might be thinking, I can make this myself. And I know there's people out there that have actually tried to make the Output desk because it is so good. It is worth copying. I wish I could show you here I wish I could actually, hang on, I know you can't see this on the podcast. So let's see if we can have a look here just quickly. I'm knocking some stuff over. There's the Output desk there, though. If you are looking on YouTube, I'll let you have a little look at that. That's my desk. But, yeah, you get the idea. It's look, maybe you don't get the idea, but it's very good quality, and I love it. Okay, we're having some weird issues here with the camera cover, lens cover. Anyway, let's keep moving along. So here we can see, okay, we've got the absorbers on the screen. Absorber pack of 4 for $449. Yes, might seem expensive, but it is hardware and it looks aesthetically pleasing. And if it does the job, though, let's not forget, these guys are good at making things look good, but the functionality, of course, is very important. I'll just scroll through the colors here. So you got this sort of lighter charcoal or a white, more of an ash white, and then you got this orange. They call it granite, sorry. Orange, sunset, and charcoal. There you go, 3 colors. And then, as I was saying, you can actually layer these up So you can have charcoal on charcoal, or you could have granite on charcoal, or you could have orange on charcoal, or vice versa, mixing up the colors and so forth. They also have bass traps. Now, I'm not entirely sure, just looking at these pictures, the main difference, it looks like there might be a slope, and these, of course, are to be used and put into the corners of the room to capture any bass frequencies, because what happens with bass frequencies, especially when you're mixing, is a very odd thing, especially in a very symmetrical room. The bass tends to hover over into the corners of the room because bass travels very far, but it actually gets stuck in the corners and it reverberates around and can cause some really weird things to happen in your mixing environment, make it very hard, especially, of course, for mixing bass, because you don't know what's going on. The frequency's wobbling and going out of control all over the place. So bass traps is where it's at. $449 for a pack of 2. These, of course, have only just been released. And then you've got the diffuser. Now, diffuser is used essentially, or more or less, towards the back of the studio room. You can use it at the front or the back, depending on your room layout. They have it in the different colors as well, but that obviously just stops, multiple reflections from happening. Anyway, I hope this is of interest for you. If it isn't, then I totally understand. Skip to the next product, but I thought this was pretty cool. Output reaching out, of course. We didn't speak about this, but Output actually does software as well. Now, I'm not as familiar with their software, but apparently they have some pretty good software that they do as well. And they're a very innovative company, hailing out of California there. So shout outs to Output for getting these. I know it might not seem the most interesting product, but it is one of those essential things you need in a studio that's not always the most sexiest. Again, I've said this before, like your audio sound card is also another thing. It's like a necessity. It's like the heart of your studio, but again, it's not one of those exciting purchases. So at least they've made this aesthetically pleasing and good on the eye, and hopefully we can test them out and check them out for y'all. Again, this room is probably not the best room for me to test them out in, so I'll probably try it in one of my more symmetrical, sort of square, reflecty sort of rooms. All right, next piece of news here. I thought this was interesting. Actually, this is not only interesting, but you need to jump on this. If you're listening to this podcast in the future, then I'm sad to say you may have missed out, but you do have up until, here we go, let's get the date here. I think it's March. Anyway, what is it? What am I talking about? We'll get to the date there, but what am I talking about is the Bob Moog Foundation is having another raffle, giving away one of their classic vintage Minimoogs signed by Herb Deutsch. Now, in honor of Herb Deutsch, the Bob Moog Foundation is thrilled to announce that they are launching their 2022 raffles. They only do like 1 or 2 of these a year for a fully restored vintage Minimoog synthesizer signed by Herb on February 9th. And it is his 90th birthday. Wow. I had no idea. These guys are getting up to the top end, aren't they? These pioneers in electronic music. The featured Minimoog serial number 11535 was built at Moog Music's Cheektowaga, New York, I'm sorry, I probably butchered that name totally, NY era factory during the late 70s and has an estimated value of $10,000. You can buy a ticket for only $20, right? This Minimoog has been meticulously restored and future-proof for the lauded synthesizer technician Wes Target of Analogics. That is pretty exciting indeed. And in 1963, who is Herb, you might be asking? Herb Deutsch, young professor of music at Hofstra University as well as an experimental jazz musician, approached Bob Moog at a music educators conference, and that sparked a year-long discussion and collaboration with Deutsch providing guidance from a musician's standpoint and Moog creating a new technology based on those specifications. Now, one thing I do know is that at that time, when Herb was discussing or developing these synthesizers, he asked for a chromatic keyboard because before that, essentially, they didn't have a chromatic keyboard. It's more or less like a rack sort of affair, So anyway, this guy's the top dog. If you're looking here on YouTube, there's a picture. I'm not going to read the whole article there, but I thought I would mention this on the podcast because I want you guys to check it out. If you want a chance to win a piece of history, then you need to enter this. I've entered. And if I win, then I will share the goodness with you guys. But I really hope my listeners win. That's what I pray for the most. I mean, this synthesizer, again, is a piece of electronic music history, and you would be so fortunate to win this, and you can get in there for only $20, and it goes to a good cause. This is the other thing. The Bob Moog Foundation goes towards educating children and adults alike, I believe, in music. So it goes to a really fantastic cause, educating music. And yeah, you can read the whole article here, but it is a raffle. They only do this a few times a year and it's worth a mention. Check it out. The Moog Bob Moog Foundation raffle to win that amazing MiniMoog synthesizer. All right, next one here comes to us from 8up. No strangers to the podcast. I don't know why I'm saying that. These guys have only had a couple of mentions on the podcast. But 8up makes some pretty interesting samples. And we're getting a little bit, this podcast today, we're getting a little bit chiptune here because I got a couple of chiptuning products. In fact, our last one is going to be a bit of fun with chiptune. But what is chiptune, you ask? It is that 8-bit sound from the old school Nintendos and Sega era, and you've got the blips and Game Boy especially. That Game Boy engine has a real crunchy sort of 8-bit lo-fi sound, and if you like that sound or you make chiptune music or you're interested in that, then this sample pack could be for you. So 8up, and this has come to us thanks from KVR Audio, by the way. 8up has released 8-bit get items, a collection of 8-bit samples for when you grab that energy pack, secure a heart to fill your life meter, score a weapon, upgrade, or pick up a key or a quest item. Or how about opening the chest? Come on, treasure chest. This pack contains 98 8-bit get item samples, long repeaters, short repeaters, melodic, fast risers, and jumpers and crawlers. And one SFX patch for Native Instruments Contact Ableton Live, Machine, and Logic Pro. EXS 24 sampler, FL Studio, MPC expansion pack, and TAL sampler. And it's 24-bit, 44.1 kilohertz wave samples. It's only $4.95. Look, I covered every spectrum for you guys. I told you I covered the expensive aesthetic hardware that you need, diffusers for your studio, and then we cover the real cheap ass stuff here as well. I like to cover all, but have a listen. This is just a little demo here of 8-bit. We share the love here on the Emlyn and Mix podcast because that is 8up, 8-bit, get item, sample pack. That's not all of them, by the way. Of course, you get a lot more, 98. But if you like that, you will definitely love the 8up sample pack from 8-bit. Next one. Now, this does come to us from our friends here on Emlyn and Mix, and they do make regular appearances, because if you listen to the podcast back in 2021, then you would have known there was a while there where pretty much Roli released an expansion every week, and we covered it, on the podcast every week. Well, Roli's back, and they're hitting hard. And actually, Roli has some secret hardware up their sleeves, which I'm super excited to get my hands on and show you guys. But we don't know about that yet. That's all embargo, secrecy, that sort of thing. But it's very exciting. That's all I can say. It's very exciting. Anyway, this is Dystopian Future. Plunge your productions into a world of sci-fi, scares, and cyberpunk skylines with Dystopian Future for Equator 2, engineered for Maxim. So if you like cyberpunk, you like neon wave, cyberwave, neon wave, I don't even know if they're genres. Maybe I'm making them up. Anyway, synthwave, sorry, is what I'm trying to think of. Let's have a listen to this. Wow. That is one creepy demo on Emlyn in the Mix. So yeah, it really is. I'm going to stop it there, but it really is that dystopian and sci-fi sound. Very good demo there from Biomechanoid. And essentially, yeah, if you want that, it's not necessarily, I was saying synthwave, it's not really synthwave. It's more, that dystopian sci-fi sort of sound, maybe more for, writing soundtrack for a movie or a TV series or just some kind of sci-fi. It doesn't even have to be one of those. It can be a track, of course, but very nice indeed. Roli excel in their expansion packs. I really love, and they're not that expensive. This one's $25. Again, if this is for you, then you definitely should check it out from Roli. It is Dystopian Future, a brand new expansion pack. All right, this next one really... Now we're mixing it up now because we're going back to analog. We're going to vintage. This is Vintage Vault from UVI, and boy, do they have a brand new pack for you. This is basically all of their analog vintage sounds just smooshed into one pack. So it's the premier collection of authentic vintage synthesizers and drum machine sounds, which just got better. It's the Vintage Vault, which now includes 36 UVI products, 800,000 samples, and over 14,000 handcrafted presets, all created using the original hardware, 255 machines overall. Now, if you have been following this podcast or you've listened to it in the past, we did cover UVI quite a bit in 2021. And one of the common themes we found with UVI is that they essentially do some of the best sampling jobs around. Like, they meticulously either sample instruments or they emulate the absolute goodness out of them. All right, so you can explore your own personal dream, studio packed with over 5 decades of synthesizers and drum machines, from analog to digital, classic to obscure, all recorded in professional studios through Class A signal chains, just like they were for countless hit records. And now you can experience the raw grit, character, and texture of dozens of real hardware instruments with all the simplicity of software. Vintage Vault is easy to use, completely portable, instantly recallable, and never out of sync or out of tune, unless you want it to be, of course, as it's analog. And it's all the sounds you could possibly want when and whenever you need them. So let's keep having a look here. So in depth, let's have a look here. What do we get? So we get an optimized workflow, of course. UVI, if you've seen their GUIs, are very nice. Infinitely adaptable, works in the Falcon player, and they also have the UVI player as well. And just want to go down and see what products. All right, here we go. So it's got a new instrument here, BitZone. Wow, I want to have a listen to this. BitZone, this is part of the Vault, Vintage Vault. Let's have a quick listen. That's nice. So that's the BitZone there. Let's move along. We won't be able to show you all of the instruments here, but we'll just give you an idea of what you get with this Vintage Vault from UVI. So this is Emulation 2 Plus. Let's have a quick listen to that. 80s never end. Slamming. Ooh, yeah, I'm loving this. love for me to stop that demo. I was getting right into it. I had to stop it though because we've got a few to get through here. But that was a little demo there. Emulation 2, 80s Never End by Dip Crusher. Very nice demo. All right, let's listen to maybe one more. So you got the Hybrid 6000s, powerful analog tones and drum from the quintessential SD synthesis workhorse. Let's have a quick listen. Actually, we'll listen to one more, the drums next. Let's have a quick listen to this one, Hybrid 6000 Showcase by Theo G. All right, so I think you get the idea with that one there. If you like those 80s drums, those real stylized 80s drums, you got the Primate Plus here, which kind of looks like more of a Roland drum machine. Primate, let's have it. This is by Theo G. Let's have a listen to this one as well. Yeah, it's your analog drum machine affair, but you get the idea. That's nice. Cowbell. Anyway, look, there's heaps here. We're not going to be able to get through everything, of course, but this is Vintage Vault 4, and, you know, we've got a plethora as we look through here on the website. Program 24, PX Memories, PX Sunbox, which we looked at last year, the Super 7. I love the Super 7. We looked at that last year. That is the mint of synth wave programming. It's just unreal. You got Beatbox Anthology 2. If you like UVI stuff, you've been thinking about getting it, this is definitely a pack. Now, again, I just have to mention this because I don't want it to seem like I'm trying to flog off this software. There's no kickback for me. In fact, UVI have, full disclosure, UVI have loaned me or given me some not for resale licenses of their software in the past, but currently I don't actually have any NFRs with UVI, so full disclosure, is no kickback at all for me. I just like UVI as a software developer. I like what they do. Hailing from France, they're making some very, very, I like the vintage stuff. I like that, in case you haven't told, I love that 80s sort of dance disco beat. There's something about it, it's very good, especially even like early hip hop and the breaks, that sort of stuff. I love all that, you know. That essentially started from disco, you know, in the 70s, and then it'll go into breaks, and then I'm getting so excited I'm moving my microphone. Anyway, you get the idea. That sound they capture very well with UVI. And we scroll along, this website just keeps going down and down. Actually, there's an interesting looking one here, Mallow. Oh, so you get the origins of sampling a sound that shaped the 60s. The Mellotron here, everything has been sampled, of course. Everything is emulated. Synthox. I mean, if that isn't a Dave Smith synthesizer, then I don't know what is. All right, so that's Vintage Vault from UVI, $399. Check that out if that interests you, and you just get a ridiculous amount of instruments if you like that analog vintage sound. All right, back to Spotify. They just don't seem to leave, and yes, they even get onto my freaking podcast because look, this is a music podcast. Yes, it's music technology primarily, but we also want to look at music and what's happening in the world of music, because does the idea of creating music scare you? Does the idea of releasing music worry you, or does it excite you? Hopefully it excites you. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to keep you inspired and keep you wanting to create and not give up your passion or your dreams. There is a future for you out there. And this is an interesting and, of course, very controversial topic, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but I thought this article, this is a bit of a different take on the whole Joe Rogan, Neil Young thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then maybe you took a time machine from 2021 and just came straight here. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, but essentially, Neil Young has protested about Joe Rogan's podcast, very upset about what Joe Rogan has been spreading information or misinformation about the COVID vaccines and so forth. So his protest was to get his music. He said, either you get rid of my music from Spotify or Joe Rogan goes. So he gave Spotify more or less an ultimatum, and Spotify decided to keep Joe Rogan, as Joe Rogan is was the number one listening medium on Spotify, and podcasts, number one podcast in the world in terms of listeners, got like 20 million listeners or something crazy like that. And Neil Young is like 76 on the list in Spotify, which is pretty good. Like, it's in the top 100, but in comparison to Joe Rogan's podcast, he's nothing. So, of course, Spotify chose Joe Rogan's podcast. But this article is interesting because it's coming to us from musictech.com, and essentially the title of this article is "Why Aren't More Younger Artists Removing Their Music from Spotify?" Now, I wanted to just read this for you here because I thought this was quite fascinating indeed. So, 2022... yes, the year we're in right now, 2022, is not exactly off to a promising start for Spotify because, yeah, I know, that is true. I think Spotify, I've only done 6 podcasts this year, and Spotify has somehow managed to get in at least 3 times. So on the 24th of January, rock's grizzled grandfather, Neil Young, apparently he's like I'm not that familiar with Neil Young myself either, but apparently he's like the guy that sort of started grunge, or not grunge. He's not like Kurt Cobain, but he's like an early form of grunge music, but from like the 60s or 70s or something. Anyway, posted an open letter demanding the company make a choice between the music and the world's most popular podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, which I just said before. Now, the streaming giant swiftly came down on Rogan's side, removed Young's tracks, and tried to shrug the whole thing off by publicizing its rather vague content policy. But the stone that Young kicked over has kept on rolling, and Spotify is now facing an avalanche of bad press. Fellow icons of the 60s and 70s music scene, a smattering of young artists, and a number of Spotify's other exclusive podcasters have stood in solidarity with Young. The chief of the World Health Organizer's voiced support, and even the White House took the opportunity to weigh in. The criticism of Rogan has also expanded to include his historic use of racially insensitive language, prompting the company to surreptitiously remove 70 episodes of the JRE podcast. Finally, the intense scrutiny of the platform has reignited long smoldering discontent regarding Spotify's business model and how it pays artists. Because this... yeah, there's all of that side of things, the Joe Rogan and Neil Young thing. And there's also what was happening with Spotify. The reason why Spotify was making news more recently was that the CEO of Spotify was investing his hard-earned money into AI, defense AI, artificial intelligence, which a few artists really were very upset with, where the money that was raised from him essentially making money off musicians and going to something which they do not agree with, and hence boycotting the platform altogether. But this is a different kettle of fish. And why I wanted to show you this article is, let me keep reading it for you because it gets more interesting. So why has Young's boycott gathered such attention where others produced only short-lived headlines? That's right. Those other Spotify stories we spoke about, they've only had short-lived headlines and never got this much media coverage. Now, of course, you could argue Joe Rogan's podcast is the number one podcast on the planet, but one reason is that vaccine misinformation is very much on the public mind at the moment. But another factor is that the outsized influence that older artists have on the music business as a whole. And this is the part I wanted you guys to hear. So the market share of new music is shrinking. I don't want this to discourage you, by the way. We've got to do something about this, guys. If you're producing new music, we've got to change this, okay? So while older music has become the primary driver of growth in the industry, isn't that interesting? So accounting for, check this out, 70% of the US market in 2021 is older music. It's not the new stuff. So simply put, the industry has its gaze locked firmly on the rear view mirror, which is why the back catalogs of artists like Bowie, Dylan, and Springsteen have been sold off for eye-popping figures or eye-watering amounts. So Neil Young isn't immune to this lure of this gold rush either. He sold off 50% of the rights to his music to publishing house Hypnosis, it's Hypnosis but with a G, at the start of 2021. However, his decision to retain half of the musical rights is another factor in all this. Young is able to demand his music be removed, while many artists sign away copyright to their recordings as part of a record deal, meaning they probably couldn't get their music taken off Spotify even if they wanted to. Now, I hope that all makes sense. I hope that was interesting for you guys. And I don't know if you care about my opinion on all of this. I have shared it before on Spotify. And in terms of, the CEO, I said that I separate the CEO from musicians altogether. I don't see him. He's not a musician. He's a businessman. He's a capitalist. And that's, I'm not saying that in a dirty way or that that's a dirty thing being a capitalist. I'm not against that at all. What I'm saying is that it's his choice what he does, whether that's good or bad. It is bad. And I do stand with the artists that are disagreeing with that. I think that that's wrong. And if there was another platform, especially for someone like me, and I know a lot of my listeners too who probably release music, we kind of unfortunately have to rely on Spotify because they own such a large share of the music distribution. And I guess that's where it does make it hard, because you kind of need Spotify, but at the same time you might not agree with entirely what they do. But if you can see that the CEO is actually, he's a separate entity from musicians, and I get it, it's very upsetting. So I'm in two minds about this, because also there's the other factor that, and this is my own thing, you may disagree with it, but I feel that Joe Rogan should have freedom to say or interview whoever he wants. There shouldn't be any censoring or cancelling on that. Sure, if there's some information that may not be correct, then he should definitely have that addressed and have different views and different points on that. And this is very funny for me because I haven't always agreed with Joe Rogan myself. And one of the things I disliked about Joe Rogan is I felt he always sat on the fence, never leaned in. He never leaned in on his full opinion. And that's funny because this article is more or less, it's saying the opposite. From what I've heard with like Neil Young and all these guys boycotting Spotify, is that they are more or less saying that Joe Rogan does lean in on one side and his viewpoint is one-sided. He's totally anti-vaccination or whatever, but I've actually felt the opposite about Joe Rogan. I felt he's always been on the fence, and I personally didn't like that, because I like it when someone has a firm decision and a firm idea on something. So my mind is in two places with this. Is one that I don't 100% love Spotify, but I do know unfortunately it is a necessity at the moment. And if there was another platform that could come up that could be better, then definitely for musicians at least, that would be great. And then I'm also in the mind that even though I've had my differences with how I feel about Joe Rogan's viewpoints, I think he is free to talk to whoever he wants, and I don't think there should be any censorship on that. So that's my viewpoint on this. And we kind of diverted off the main topic of this article, is that the interesting thing is that also if we look at music as a whole on Spotify, that it's dominated by the old artists and the old musicians who, well, they essentially killed it. Like, they had the best time in the record industry. That was the time to really exploit the music industry. Now we're in this is a totally different era, and now we have to make different choices as musicians. We more or less have to do every job of the musician, management, treasury, everything now. I mean, there are the rare cases where people do get picked up and they do get looked after with great management and so forth. But more and more, it seems as a musician these days, it's better to look out for yourself. Now, I'm totally obviously going off on a tangent here. I hope I'm keeping this interesting for you guys, but it is one of those controversial topics that does need a lot of words and does need a lot of explaining to obviously, get the viewpoint across of what is actually happening and why maybe this is happening with Spotify and why people are boycotting it. Now, let's read a little bit more of this article as it gets to the part about the money. And not everyone does want to, even for artists who agree with Young's stance and have retained copyright of their recordings, leaving Spotify would be economic insanity. That's right. In 10 years leading up to 2020, the company grew from a 7% share of the US market, get this, from 2010, 7%, to a staggering 83% on a global scale. And the company attracts 32% of all paid streaming subscribers, twice the amount of its nearest competitor, Apple Music. That is incredible, because Apple Music was essentially, iTunes before 2010, it was dominating the music market. It's not anymore. I don't know if that's because Steve Jobs left us or whatever happened there, but Spotify just had the better platform for this, and it won that race. So this gets to the heart of why it is generally older, wealthy artists who are leading the protests. Recording artists have always been in precarious financial position, but after 2 years of pandemic-induced disruptions to the music industry, streaming revenue is an essential lifeline for many. So there you go. So you need to be on every platform distributing music, make as much money as you possibly can. Because of this pandemic, you can't perform live and so forth. So Neil Young's former bandmate Graham Nash highlighted the reality faced by young and emerging artists when he signed to Young's boycott. He stated that many younger musicians and many musicians of all ages rely on platforms like this to gain exposure to a wider audience, there you go, and share their music with the world. And not everyone is able to take steps like this. So as the firestorm around Spotify has spread, a familiar criticism has surfaced. This is the one that's important for us musicians. So the company devalues the music its business was built on, paying out as little as 0.01 per stream cent. Wait, is that 1 cent? Yeah, sorry. 1 cent per stream. Still terrible, right? Because I think I remember even radio, I don't know about now, but at least I've been working in radio nearly 20 years, can you believe? But at least radio was paying, I remember this, it was paying about 20 cents per play. And now that might not sound like a lot, but that's 20 times this, okay? And that was back, before inflation or whatever. So if you're wondering why there hasn't been similar activism and solidarity with the big name artists on this issue of streaming payments, the answer is that it's complicated. That's right. And it's also, where do you stand on this? As contentious as the issue of vaccines has become, in many ways it is easier to unite around than the thorny problem of streaming payments. For one, different artists get paid at vastly different rates. This is the other problem with Spotify. For the artists that have the largest voice and the most influence, the system is working just fine. By contrast, the artists getting the smallest slice of the pie simply don't have the influence to grab headlines on the financial wiggle room to rock the boat. But the problem is greater than that. Even if artists were to take industrial action on a larger scale, it's not all that clear that the economics of streaming would allow for much to change. A music industry veteran and Substack author Rachel Hurley recently highlighted the seldom discussed economic realities of streaming. And while her contention that paid musicians is not a job that society needs is sure to raise a few hackles, it's hard to dismiss her larger argument that music as a commodity is bumping up against the age-old problem of supply and demand. The more abundant something is, the harder it is to change a premium for it. And as digital music production and reproduction has gained prominence, the historical barriers to becoming a musician have crumbled away and the amount of music being created has exploded. And that is true. I mean, especially with what we talk about on this podcast is music technology, right? And how to create and inspire. And that's my job. I want to help. But I don't believe in scarcity. I don't believe in that. That is I don't normally swear on this podcast, but that is a bullshit term. That does upset me. That scarcity is not, the answer to having better music. I think the more artists you have creating music, the more musicians creating it doesn't always have to be amazing, but the more you've got, the more gems that are going to get produced. Surely. I know that was a golden era, and maybe for the baby boomers, that music that they love, it's on Spotify, and that people go back to it. Because even people my age group, Gen Y, whatever the hell Gen I am, we go back to some of that baby boomer music as well. So I understand why it has that popularity, but there's no reason why the new stuff getting made now can't have that huge outreach. Anyway, this article, I can go on and on. It is very controversial. It does fire me up a little bit. And of course, there's our lovely CEO friend, Daniel Ek. I don't know what you guys think about him, but yeah, he's been hitting it hard. And this is such a tough thing for me because I'm just in two minds about this. I feel like Joe Rogan definitely deserves to keep doing what he's doing. And I don't understand the protest. I mean, sure, that is his stance, but it's not going to create an effect unless you're something bigger. It's not really going to create the effect. And I guess they want to see more people jumping off, but it's hard when you got this platform that is just so big and just takes up so much of the music share. Anyway, we could go, if you want to leave a comment in the comment section below of everything I've just talked about here, yes, it's a hot topic, just leave it in the comment section below. I'll read it. And yeah, look, let's talk this out. What is the right thing to do here? Do we need a new music distribution platform that doesn't have all this weirdness tied to it? As musicians, it may be what is needed right now. But at the same time, I don't think that Joe Rogan should stop doing what he's doing. So it's a hard one for me. For me, I'm gone. Let's move on to the next thing. All right, so last one here. This comes to us from AudioThing, audiothing.net. This is our last product for the day. And this is the Minibit 8-bit demo. See, I told you, after that heavy news, I told you I had some fun and light. And Chiptune, that's right, Chiptune. This is the Minibit. And if you like Space Invaders, so that 8-bit sample pack that we looked at, that was more about samples. This is a full instrument from AudioThing. Let's have a listen to how cool this thing sounds. Here's a little demo for you. Crush those bits. So that is the Minibit. And dang, guys, this is $10 at the moment. This is an introductory price, of course. Chiptune Synth. Minibit is an 8-bit chiptune style synthesizer plugin that emulates the sound of 80s game consoles and retro computers. It features a main oscillator with 18 waveforms paired with a sub oscillator, a square wave pitched 1 octave below, and the waveforms are not band limited and will produce aliasing. Furthermore, using the built-in bit crusher, you can create even more noisy and retro sounds. Minibit also features a synced 8-step sequencer with multiple destinations. Yes, it's been a long day. From noisy snare-like steps to ambient subs, Minibit has many users beyond what one expects from a chiptune synth. There's a few demos here. So we've got a step sequencer. So Minibit features an 8-step sequencer that can be used to automate several parameters: pitch, volume, cutoff, resonance, waveform, and downsampling. Sequencing the waveforms will generate sounds reminiscent of early trackers and wavetable synthesizers. Each track can also be randomized using the dice button on the right. Custom waveforms, classic consoles, and works on Mac OS, Windows, and so forth. But I thought that was a nice little one from AudioThing. I like what AudioThing does. They have some really funky little plugins, and this is only $10. If you like that sound, you definitely need to check that out. All right, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up there. If my vibe was different, if you liked my vibe today, that I was rolling at the end of a very long day, I'm extremely tired, but I'm happy that we got to do a podcast today, then leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you thought of the podcast today. And please, if you can, leave a review on this podcast. Just go to the podcast app or wherever you listen to this podcast. You should be able to scroll down to the bottom of that app and there's a review section. Please leave me a review, whatever you thought, whatever you feel is worthy. Am I a 1-star? Did I upset you with my thoughts on the Spotify controversy right now? I hope I didn't. I hope I didn't just like all my listeners have just left me now that don't agree with me. I'm very sorry. I love you guys. I just want to help you guys. That's all I want to do. And yeah, I don't know. That's everything. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I enjoyed doing this podcast. We'll be back next week with episode 7. And until then, I'll be scouring through the internet looking for the best music technology news for you. So, boom, you know what to do. Peace out. Boom.